Hi everyone, welcome to this very special video. This is something new that we're doing, and this is the first in this series. And we'll be talking about topics, not specifically technical topics, but business-related topics in this series. Now, this evening, and we are recording this late at night, I have a very special guest, and some of you may know him out there in the industry, and it's Kree Govender. Kree, welcome. Welcome to this video.
Thank you so much, Devash. Thanks for making the time. And I feel very, very honored and humbled to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to our chat.
We're living in challenging times. We have this pandemic. We live in this era where now a lot of people are under pressure in terms of their jobs due to the pandemic. Even people who have not been retrenched will have that uncertainty, the fear, where's my next paycheck going to come from? So I wanted to ask you, Kree, firstly, before we dive deeper into leadership principles, what do you say as a leader, a business leader, and perhaps even a community leader, to people who are in this very stressful situation at this point in time?
Very good question. There are so many people on a daily basis that reach out to me, as I'm sure they reach out to many other people within their networks and their industry. And the truth is, it is an unprecedented time, and it's challenging to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else who's going through this, because you're not authentically feeling it on your skin. I think you and I, as well as many others, are very blessed for some of the organizations that we work for. But we all know close family, friends, people within the industry that have not been as fortunate. And it really does take a lot of mental fortitude at this point in time to steel yourself not to get into a state of panic, and have a moment to stop, pause, and decide what you want to do next. It also speaks to the resilience that we as human beings have, right? Sometimes change is not something that we actively seek. Sometimes it's cast upon us. And when it's cast upon us, you've got the opportunity then to either delve into despair and panic, or to take a moment to stop, pause, think, plan, and say, okay, this is the situation at hand. What can I do from here on out? It may seem simplistic and idealistic in terms of the way that I'm portraying it, but that is the only way that one can approach it. You've got to go within and to find the resilience to say, how am I going to dig myself out of the situation that I've got? And there are a multitude of stories in terms of people that have actually persevered during this time. Point in case, a group of pilots, and as we know, the aviation industry was one that was hit quite significantly, and it was a husband and wife that were both pilots and found themselves now out of jobs. What did they end up doing? They took one of their passions, which was developing wrought iron furniture, and then turned that into a business. So as much as we've seen a lot of hardship in people, we've also seen a lot of creativity and resilience, and people really going forth and saying, okay, this is an opportunity here for me to reset. I've perhaps always wanted to do something else. Here's my opportunity for me to delve into that.
So that's very interesting. What I'm hearing is, regardless of whether this pandemic continues for a long time or it's over and we go back to normalcy, develop that inner strength and resilience. So that whatever life throws at you, your job, your personal life, whatever gets thrown at you, you have that inner strength and resilience to kind of deal with it, quickly come up with a plan B, plan C, like the pilot example that you gave. Is that more or less along the lines?
Absolutely. And I guess there are two aspects to it, right? Whenever we're going through something, whatever it may be, often we lament why it's happening to us, and you say, woe is me in many instances. And that can continue for a period of time, and it's a natural part of the process. But there has to be a point where you say, okay, that's the end of that. Now what's next? And I think a fundamental aspect to enable you to move from the space of inaction and paralysis into action is a very simple thing called gratitude.
Yes.
As dire as things may be, many people would give an arm and a leg to swap. And it's taking time to be grateful for the things that are in your space, physical health, roof over your head, potentially some savings, the support of family. They could be, innumerable if you take the time to acknowledge that. And that gives you positivity in a space where it could just be purely surrounded by negativity. So absolutely, I agree with what you're saying.
And I would imagine that positivity brings the stability, allows you to develop new ideas, which help you move on. But if you don't have that positivity, you're just gonna go downwards instead of moving upwards. And where do you, as a leader, find your inspiration and your positivity?
So there are a number of sources that I would lean on. I guess one of the fundamental ones is spirituality,
Right.
a strong sense in terms of going within and trying to understand yourself. What are the things that cause you to react in a particular way? Having awareness around that. So in that aspect of spirituality, self-realization, because
Yeah.
once you become a little bit more self-actualized, when things happen to you, you have the ability to step out and be the observer of the experience that you're living, and that gives you a very different perspective. So that is one. It's not the easiest thing to do, and I by no means say that it's something that I can practice continuously, but it is something that I try to make time for. That's one. The second piece is really to practice staying calm. So when things are happening to you, to have that ability to really stop, pause, and evaluate what's happening, as opposed to moving straight into action and reaction. I shared something with the team the other day, and I said, being calm is a superpower. And I drew an analogy to a rugby game. Before the guys enter into a scrum, it's stop, pause, and then engage.
Yeah.
As in rugby, so too in life and in leadership. I believe that's a fundamental aspect. There was a quote that I heard once, and it said, if you have 10 seconds to make a decision, think for 9.
Right.
And that's always something that I've held onto. And I believe that gives you a sense of clarity as well. So those are some fundamental things that I hang on to in terms of inspiration. But the other thing that's critically important for me are two other elements. Or actually, I'd call them three. So the first one is family. So for me, I get a lot of energy and a lot of strength from that, because that's what drives a large portion of my purpose. I know why I'm making the sacrifices that I am, and it's to enable the type of life that I want for them, to enable the time and space that I want to give them. So, and that's the biggest motivation that I believe I have. That's a big, strong driving force. The other piece is around physical well-being. For
Yes.
me, it's not just around the mental aspect. I spend maybe not as much time as I could, but I do spend a significant amount of time focusing on that. That brings a lot of clarity. It gives me a chance to reset, picks up my endorphin levels, and really gives me the energy to tackle some extremely long days. And the last piece, I would say, is grounded in what I know to be my purpose, and that's really around humility and servitude. And if I approach every situation and every engagement, irrespective of who the person is, either personally or professionally, I try to approach it in the same manner. And those are the things. As long as I'm grounded in that purpose, and I know why I'm doing it because it speaks to my authentic self, that gives me a lot of strength and energy. And those are the things that really give me the grounding, or the big rocks in my life that I can dip into to pull out energy. A fantastic book I read recently by a guy called David Goggins, and it's called "You Can't Hurt Me." And he has this concept of what he calls cookie jar, and he says, when you're going through the hardest time of your life, you need to dip back into this thing he calls the cookie jar, where he says, where were there moments in your life that you've gone through extreme hardship? Go out and pull up one of those cookies, because you will surprise yourself at how much of depth, strength, character, and resilience you've actually got.
You'll
and that's
find you've done this before, basically.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, life has its own personalized version of pain carved out for each and every one of us. No one escapes unscathed, right? And having that awareness around it brings about a sense of acceptance when it's happening. And if you can look for the lessons that happen during that time, as opposed to just purely the pain that you're feeling, you can walk out of there and understand that in many ways, there are growth experiences that are driven from that as well.
Yeah, I must say, Kree, that's really inspirational. That last answer that you've given. Just to recap for the viewers, so you said the basis for this inner strength, which will help you overcome adversity. One is spirituality. I myself, I'm a spiritual person, as you would know. I think we're similar in that, but we also have to accept that not everybody out there has that spiritual experience or spiritual basis. We can talk about certain parts that they can choose just to awaken a little bit, because it does bring calmness, and that was the second one that you mentioned. Stay calm. The rugby example, I think pause, touch, engage. It's quite funny. And then you mentioned knowing what grounds you, your family, very important to you. What was the last one?
It was around
Family.
putting energy back in, so the physical form, putting
Cookie
energy
jar
back.
example.
Yes.
Okay.
And going.
And I can already see anyone who embraces that during times of adversity, they're going to get so much. You kind of know, based on this approach that you're talking about, and we just mentioned it, you kind of know inside of you what's best for yourself. You can only really take ideas from other people, but you will find the answer for your own problems. You agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is, and it is up to you. All the answers, as they say, lie within. If you can find those moments of stillness to really get to a point where you cut out the noise and the chatter, in that stillness, supreme answers lie, right? So absolutely, we're no person is more unique than another. That's my belief system. I strongly
Yes.
believe that we're all connected to the same source. That we all have the ability to tap into that universal truth and universal energy that I believe comes in those moments of stillness and really going within. Your soul knows what's right.
Yes, yes. What they call your gut feel sometimes, right?
Very
Or
much
your
so.
sixth sense. I think many cultures around the world have developed this concept, the natural feel. So we'll explore that in a sec. Just looking back at yourself, growing up, what leaders out there have inspired you? Are there maybe one or two names, one or two other books that you want to talk about, or courses, things like that? Something that somebody watching this now who's got their interest based on what you've just said says, okay, what's the next step? What do you recommend me looking at? What would you say?
Okay. So, and I guess we get these, there's everyday leadership. We experience it all the time.
Yeah.
People often confuse leadership as being something that's bestowed upon someone by way of a title. To me, that's inauthentic. Everybody has the ability to lead and does lead at different points in their lives and in different scenarios. And it's recognizing that, number one. And I think I found that lesson at a very young age through competitive sport. And I think that was my first true taste in terms of leadership, and I was not the leader in that instance, I was very much following the leader, but I saw certain aspects that came in there that only came to light many years later, in terms of how the leader goes about setting up the team for success. How do they empower those that are not quite at the level as the others could be, but still giving them the opportunity and the basis to grow. So for me, that was one of the first real experiences with leadership. Didn't recognize it at the time. I wouldn't have recognized it if it hit me over the head. But many years later, I realized, that's exactly what I was experiencing within that scenario. And it's this aspect that there are many varied leadership principles, but the one that I hang on to the most, or the one that resonates with me, is servant leadership, right? And
Right.
there's a quote by J. Donald Watterson that I used to actually have printed up and stuck on my wall as a mental reminder. And it said, leadership is an opportunity to serve. It is not a trumpet call to self-importance. And it really is about that, deprecation in terms of self, sacrificing and putting others ahead of yourself. That to me is true leadership. And I guess it's probably a very well used scenario, or tale. But I guess my parents being activists at the time, upon Mandela's release, I was very
Yeah.
young, right? As were you, and that's really when I saw that aspect in terms of actual people leadership coming to the fore. And the man undoubtedly had presence, charisma, and the ability to rally an entire nation. And that for me was awe-inspiring. Later on in life, to get back to your question, and this is tied in very much with the spiritual journey that I undertook probably around 26, 27, and through the guides and people that I was involved with, the material that I came into contact with then took me down a very interesting path. And there's a quote that says, people don't choose the books, sometimes the books choose the people. And there is a spiritualist by the name of Eckhart Tolle, and there are two very inspirational books that were quite profound for me. And one was, The Power of Now, so living in the present moment.
Yes.
But the other one is A New Earth, which really then speaks to the flowering of human consciousness, and delves into a number of aspects, especially around the ego. A heavy read, one that you really gotta sink your teeth into, but that's really what brought about a big sense of awareness and a breakthrough in terms of, am I living purpose? Do I even know what my purpose is?
Yeah.
And it takes you along that path. The other instrumental book is by Dr. Viktor Frankl, and it's
Yes.
called Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And powerful book.
I started it a few years ago. It was recommended to me, and I never finished it. But he was in the concentration camps in World War II, Auschwitz, and he survived those camps. And I think this was a bit of a memoir from that. I did start it. I'll shamefully admit I didn't complete it. But that again, Kree, that was a very inspirational answer, I think. And just to recap, so you started off by saying an individual contributor can be a leader in his immediate group, in his or her broader group. There are many opportunities for leadership, and that's really exciting. When you sit and think about it, it's that opportunity, and you're doing good. The second concept was leadership is to serve. In the Eastern philosophies like Hinduism, we have this concept called seva, to serve humanity. And obviously, anyone who follows any Eastern philosophy, knows about that. But I think it's everywhere. I think it's in many philosophies. This, to serve humankind. You see these slogans in public office. These slogans all around the world, really. And I think when you get into that mindset, it's a reward, isn't it? when you see people grow, people that you've coached, people that you've mentored, um, even if they achieve higher than yourself, it's a massive reward, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. You touch on such a big aspect there, and it's probably one that I had neglected to mention. You need to serve selflessly, not with an
Yes.
expectation of some sort of reward or outcome from that. If you do that authentically, the universe will conspire to make many things happen for you. And you've touched on something that's very important to me, and that is the aspect of seeing others grow, or not from an egoic perspective, but seeing the potential in others that they may not immediately recognize in themselves, and to really see them break through that and start to embrace that and really own that power that they've got within, must be one of the most special things to see. It really
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah. On that note, how do you decide who to mentor? Which is the one thing, because a person like you, anyone in a large organization gets these leadership opportunities, coaching and mentoring especially. But I guess that's the one question. The second question, and I personally have struggled with the second part of it. How do you decide which mentor to choose for yourself?
Hmm. Two very good questions. So let's start off with the first part, which is, who do I choose to mentor? And more often than not, if somebody approaches me to mentor them, I I don't think I've ever turned anyone away. But
Yeah.
during the course of the mentorship, I test for certain things. I don't I don't share with the person, and here are the things that I test for. So having been a mentee in many regards, one of the things that I think I learned from was, when you set up those mentorship discussions, make sure that you have an agenda, that you're intentional, and that there's actually homework for you and your mentor to do before the next session. If it's just a general meeting that's in place and you meet and you have a coffee chat, then it's
Yes.
just a bunch of friends, right? It's too fluid. Then, and you end up in these conversations like, what do you think I should do with my career? I've got this challenge, and so forth.
So you're
So
saying, sorry to interrupt, you're saying
mm,
bring maybe the SMART principles to even the mentoring discussion.
absolutely, 100%. So, I've got a list of 10 questions. I've got them written down in my book somewhere. When I engage with a mentor, that I ask them first to assess whether they're a fit. And I'll get into that piece, but that's the type of thinking I want someone to approach me around. So, one of the first questions I ask them is, so why me? And what are you expecting out of this engagement? um,
Yeah.
and and how do you see me growing through that? And often, in many cases, um, people haven't thought through that in some sort of depth, and it doesn't mean I'll turn them away, but I say to them, listen, this is the way that I want this structured. I want it to be meaningful for you. It needs to be meaningful for me, and we've got to test this out. It doesn't mean, excuse me, that our energies will mesh. It's like a relationship, and we must both be empowered to say, hey, listen, this isn't working out for us, and be able to part without any ill feelings. Also, the course
Yeah.
of a mentorship, it has a life cycle. It's not something indefinite as well. And you got to understand, it's there for a season or a couple of seasons. And so with mentees, those are the things that I start to test for. Are they being intentional? Do they uh, do they come with an agenda prepped? Do they set up those meetings in advance? Is there a real intentionality behind what they want to do and what they want to achieve? And the number one thing for me is attitude. Um, you know, People can be taught pretty much anything. Attitude is you can't empower someone with that. You're either driven and you're hungry for it, or you're not. And so in those discussions, those are the things that I test for.
So hang on, Kree. Before we go on to choosing your mentor, I think you mentioned this attitude thing, which for me is very important. Going back to the beginning of what we said, we're in difficult times. The first thing we said is develop this inner strength to stay grounded, and we covered a few things that you should consider. But I think we're also saying work on yourself to develop the right attitude, because that is what you will need to constantly grow and overcome difficult times like this pandemic. Is that more or less right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to give you a short parable in terms of this book that I had read, and I mentioned it earlier. The short story to this is this guy, David Goggins, grew up in a family where his dad was a womanizer. He beat his mom, he beat him, beat his brother. Him and his mom, they left and they escaped from the father. He had a problem learning. He used to stutter. And he ended up working as someone in pest control, overweight. And he came home one day and he saw something on TV about the Navy SEALs, and he said, "I want to be a Navy SEAL." And what happened in terms, he was so driven and determined by that. No real physical training, none of that stuff that you would expect to
Right.
hold you in good stead to become a SEAL. And he went for a number of those pre-interviews, and everybody turned him away and said, "Listen, you're overweight. There's no way you're going to do this. You may die." And in the space of a few weeks, he was rigid about what he did, and he cut away that fat. Got to the SEAL buds, and he went through it 3 times. The first 2 times he couldn't make it through, broken legs, pneumonia, but he was so determined. And then he just had built up this desire and this resilience, and he said, "I will not be a product of what I believe to be circumstances and an upbringing that should not allow me to be here." He broke through
Right.
that. And to listen to a story like that, you realize, listen, if you can apply yourself in that manner and really, really be hungry for something, where it becomes in many ways all consuming, very little
Right.
that one can't achieve. Subsequently, he went on, he broke the world pull-up record. Yes, ultra marathon runner. I mean, it's amazing to see.
David Goggins was the name.
David Goggins, yes.
I think I'm remembering now the story, and I think it was you, Kree, that told me about this a few years ago. So it's all coming back. Very good story, positive attitude, really pulling him out of what some people would write off as a situation, a no-win situation, but he did it. He won, right? At the end of the
Yeah,
day. Okay.
absolutely.
So I'm just looking at time, and I think we need to wrap up. And we didn't get to some of the questions, so we'll probably do a part 2 and a part 3 if you're okay, and we'll see how people react to it.
Yeah, sure.
And I think one of the things I want to do is your book club. So do you want to tell us a bit about that? You've been posting not just leadership stories, which I think many people find very inspirational, but you've been supplementing that with, like the examples you've given today, good reads, good sources of information and knowledge. And perhaps we'll do an episode where we deep dive some of the best books of 2020. We've had plenty of time during lockdown to sit and read.
Absolutely. So, and I'll give you the story behind that. Growing up, it's no secret, I absolutely love to read. Granted, my choice at that time largely was fiction, and then as I grew, I moved into other books, specifically around leadership, business, spirituality. And one of the things that I constantly lamented over the last few years was that I did not have enough time to read. And,
Yeah.
at the start of this year, I said, my mission is to read at least 2 books. If I could get through 3, fantastic, per month. And I set that as my intention, and I became deliberate about it. And, initially I said, we've got a young baby. I'm rejoining Microsoft. I've got too many variables, too many things moving around. But the truth is that if you really want to, you can find time slices. And my intentionality was choosing education over entertainment. That was the number one thing for me. Besides football, every other time, if I've got a choice to make, I will choose education over entertainment. So it got to the point where I'm getting up early, reading a couple of pages or a few chapters. Whenever I had a free moment, I would pick up the book and do that. When we were in the hard lockdown, we had no help cleaning the house. I said, well, I'm not going to while away that time while I'm mopping and cleaning toilets and all of those things. I took the audiobook versions of those books, and where I stopped, I would then listen to where I had stopped. And it's amazing how much you can then accomplish in that time. When I go out for my run, I do the same thing. I no longer listen to music when I'm training. I listen to my audiobooks or my podcasts. And as such, I managed to get through vastly more books than I ever thought were going to be possible. And now it's become habit and something that I seek out and I crave.
We're gonna talk about it in a future episode. But yeah, I'm in the same mold. So just to share with you, Kree, I think you'll be very proud of me. I canceled streaming services like Netflix. If I'm not watching news or sport, which is the two things I watch, and news is like financial, economic news, I'm watching YouTube. And nowadays, as you would have seen, making YouTube videos, which is also been fun. I haven't been doing as many, but I think I'm doing one book a month. I was looking around when you said this because I leave it lying around here. And every evening before going to bed, time slicing. I think we should do an episode on it. The number one skill is time management. Do you agree? If you're on top of time management, you can achieve anything. And if you've got time management plus the inner grounding, ability to stay calm, the sense of purpose, I mean, you're going to be a winner in life, and you're going to inspire other people. And I think you are a living proof, Kree, because anyone watching this video who made it this far, I think you're going to just be inspired by what you've said. So thanks for sharing all of that today with us.
Thank you so much. It's such a humbling experience. It's been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Okay, cool. You can't get away because we mentioned time slicing. So I'm going to find more slices of time. There's already 2 or 3 things that we need to follow up on, including the book club. I want to talk about how to develop that sense of calmness, which helps you in the business sense. But we'll end there for tonight, part 1. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I just remembered I've been very bad. I should have worn a Liverpool shirt, not this generic crappy blue shirt, but I don't feel so bad because Kree hasn't got the Liverpool shirt as well.
However,
they're going to win the league this year, right, Kree? Oh, okay. He had to have it. He had to have it somewhere close, even in his garage. This is your garage, come gym, come work from home office, which I think all of us have got a little spot. So we'll see for the next one. We'll have a better looking, studio. Yeah, environment studio, just to call it that. But this was part 1. This was our first stab at just going off the rails, not doing videos that are technical, but equally as important, very, very important, especially when you look at what people are up against during this pandemic, which hopefully ends soon with the news of the vaccine coming out earlier today. So Kree, we'll wrap up there. Thanks a lot for your time. It's late at night. We're recording this, and I hope the viewers enjoyed it, and more importantly, they feel a little bit inspired. And we'll put some links to some of the anecdotes and authors that you've mentioned at the bottom there. So join us for part 2. Look out for part 2. We're going to make this a series. Hopefully, we'll find those time slices. And until then, good night and be safe. We will see you next time.
Thank you very much.